Hello and welcome to the StopDevaluation podcast. I'm your host and founder of the StopDevaluation movement, Melody Hilton. The heart of this movement is to see the value in all of humanity and live courageous lifestyles of using our power for good instead of harm. We can affect change by choosing validation over judgment, and I hope you'll take your place and make a positive impact in this world. Today's podcast is the first in a short series of interviews with Peter Demarest, who is an expert in the science of Axiogenics, which is the mind-brain science of value generation. He has influenced my life greatly through his book, Answering the Central Question: How Science Reveals the Keys to Success in Life, Love, and Leadership. He has also impacted my life through our powerful conversations supporting my life's work of generating value, healing lives, and impacting nations. From my youth, I've been compelled to be an instrument of justice. Justice is power used for good, but we'll never do justice without the conviction that every person is intrinsically valuable. Stephen R. Covey writes about Peter's book saying, "Based on the groundbreaking science of applied neuro-axiology, this book reveals the how-to principles for integrating your heart, mind, and brain to unleash your strengths and create a truly extraordinary life." Today's podcast will begin to reveal to you how valuable you are and how you can generate value through your courageous voice. Welcome, everyone. I'm extremely humbled and honored to introduce you to Peter Demarest. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today on the StopDevaluation podcast.
My honor, too.
Well, first, I want to thank you publicly for living out the message of value with such profound authenticity, and for all the investments that you made in my life personally. You've impacted my life for good, and I really value and appreciate you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think it speaks in many ways more about you than me, though.
Oh, no. Don't be humble. You're a value generator. So why don't we just start out with a basic question? Could you share the simple definition of the science of Axiogenics and its relevancy to our everyday lives?
Sure. So Axiogenics is sort of the branded word, if you will, for the science that we actually call neuro-axiology. Mm-hmm. And neuro-axiology is the fusion of everything that we know from not just the neuroscientific, but including cognitive sciences, behavioral sciences, what motivates us, what makes us tick as human beings from a psychological as well as a biological perspective. So all that we know about the brain and the mind, combined with and fused with the science of axiology, which means value science. It, as a philosophy, been around for about 2,500 years, since Plato and Socrates began to inquire into the very same questions. What makes us tick? One of the things that they realized all those years ago was that we're fundamentally driven by our perceptions and judgments of value or goodness or what we think is important and or less important. And that kind of led to the question of, well, what is good and what is value? But for 2,500 years or so, it existed more as a philosophy. Like almost all sciences, even medicine and physics was a natural philosophy, right? And in fact, Dr. Melody, your PhD is a high degree, but even if it was a PhD in, let's say, geology, it still means a doctor of philosophy, doesn't it? That's what PH stands for. So all sciences, natural sciences, have their roots in philosophy. Well, in the mid-1900s, a Dr. Robert Hartman is credited with being the father of formal or scientific neuro-axiology, applying scientific mathematics and methodology to the question that Plato and Socrates were asking 2,500 years ago and so many others since then. What is value?
Mm-hmm.
There's a very interesting story about how Dr. Hartman, who grew up in pre-Nazi Germany, got his juris degree, a JD, and was a judge, actually. And as the Nazis were coming to power, he was being pressured to sort of participate in some of what was going on, and he recognized it to be essentially evil, and ultimately fled prior to World War II, fled Germany. And he talked about how as he was leaving the country and headed first to England before he came to the United States, he had the thought that if evil, badness, could be so organized and empowered to take over an entire nation and potentially of the world, his question was, could good also be organized and understood and leveraged, if you will, to create good and to create value in the world? And that's what he dedicated the rest of his life to do. To this day, there's the Robert Hartman Institute at the University of Tennessee. There's a conference every year to further that work. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, but passed away in too young in 1973. But his work was profoundly important for his ability to decode, if you will, or identify how value is structured in nature, what good really is, and how it can be created and how it's destroyed as well. And he also developed an instrument, an assessment instrument that allows us to measure all the different ways a person thinks relative to those universal laws of value dynamics. Neuro-axiology is the integration of those two things.
I see. So what is the difference between value and having values?
Great question. Values, in the way that we typically use them, for example, a corporation releasing a statement, these are our corporate values, right?
Yes.
Or as we have conversations at the individual levels of what is it that are your key values in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of the time, whatever the corporations say or we as individuals may espouse to really are more conceptual. That is, they are things we aspire to,
mm-hmm.
but don't necessarily completely live to. We'd like to think we do. They can be guiding principles. They certainly can inform our choices and decisions. But how often do people sort of break their values? How often do people claim that they value or that, say, integrity is one of their values, but then they tell little white lies or, cheat on their taxes or something because it seems expedient? Well, to illustrate the difference, what it means is that a person doesn't necessarily value their values sufficiently to have them actually inform the decisions and actions and reactions. So value is the measure of something's ability to enhance quality of life. Now, that's sort of the human experiential definition of value. There's also a very scientific and mathematical definition of value that arises out of formal axiology. But to the human experience, it really boils down to what actually creates and enhances quality of life in all the forms that it can, and not just for one person, but for as many. And it's not about like the greatest good where we're going to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. It really is more about the greatest net value, period. Right?
So isn't value and goodness subjective, meaning it's different for every individual based upon their opinions or their personal beliefs?
Yes and no. The science of axiology, formal axiology, proves that it is completely and utterly objective in nature, and it's universal. However, as Dr. Hartman himself said, in the human mind, it is completely and totally subjective. It's sort of like, as an analogy, the laws of physics allow us to understand, certain mathematics, let's say, of how fast a car is going, right? So we know that a car driving at 60 miles an hour down the highway, well, it's going 60 miles an hour. But another car coming towards us at 60 miles an hour, to them, they're also traveling 60 miles an hour. But if you see the other guy coming at you, subjectively, relatively speaking, we're coming together at 120 miles an hour, right? So subjectively, it looks like one car is going 120 miles an hour and the other car may be sitting still if we didn't know we were moving. But the laws of physics also throw a couple of other things that we don't feel, we don't think about, and that is that while if the car is headed, east or west, then you also, in terms of actual speed in the universe, we have to account for the speed of the Earth and its rotation and its movement through space. Now, those may seem irrelevant when it comes to how we live our lives, but that concept, when it comes to how we create our lives and how we create value, is not irrelevant.
Wow.
And it's true. Right? To give you an example, the science proves mathematically why and why and how organizations that actually value the intrinsic value of the human being above all else will see, on average, 40% greater performance and productivity.
That's
40%.
powerful. That's powerful right
Yeah.
there. Yes. That's the difference between soft skills versus hard skills. It's like I'm engaging my heart. I'm connecting to value. Therefore, I make a greater investment because of the degree of value that I hold for that.
Yes. We've heard, for at least a decade in the corporate world, the whole mantra of putting people first. Not everybody actually does it. Sounds like a good theory, sounds like a good idea, but it's actually a scientific fact.
There you go.
That when we, right? And I think that speaks to the importance of the science to the human race, really. There's another analogy is in 1902. Man's quest to fly had people strapping all kinds of contraptions onto their backs and jumping off of cliffs, hoping that it would work, right? We've all seen pictures of people putting wings and flaps and all kinds of things, and a lot of people got hurt and many got killed in that attempt. But something happened in 1903. What happened was that the Wright brothers, at least they're credited, with kind of putting the pieces together of the mathematics of aerodynamics. What's it really take to build an airplane that can fly? And they designed it on paper based on mathematical formulas, which are part of the world of physics and aerodynamics, and they were able to build that first airplane, that Kitty Hawk. Well, 66 years later, we put a man on the moon and brought him back again, right? It fundamentally changed life on the planet. It's nothing for us to get on it's not nothing, but it's pretty amazing that we can literally get on the planet, on a plane and be on the other side of the planet in a half a day.
Yeah.
Right? But more than just putting a man on the moon or being able to fly to the other side of the planet, tremendous things happened grew out of that in medicine and other forms of technology, including iPhones and smartphones and just so much that fundamentally changed the world. Well, Dr. Hartman discovered the laws of value dynamics, how value is created. What would happen when people had a greater understanding of how that actually works, and not just in theory, but in practice. That is, they were able to see the connections in their own experiences.
Yes.
And to use their mind to be able to maximize the value, the quality of life that they create. Because if you really think about success, whether as an organization or as an individual, real success is not about the value we get, but rather the value we create.
Wow. What value are we creating? Today in part 1, Peter Demarest laid a basic foundation for the science of axiogenics. We learned the difference between value and having values, as well as learning how values and goodness are both objective and subjective. Don't miss part 2, where we will learn the objective scientific facts of how devaluation negatively affects us and others, and as well as how seeing ours and others' intrinsic worth empowers us. Until next time, be a courageous voice of validation in your world. I want to thank you for listening and encourage you to become a part of the StopDevaluation movement. Be sure to like and follow #StopDevaluation on social media, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and visit StopDevaluation.com for more information and free resources. You can help spread the movement by sharing with others, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, and most of all, by living a courageous lifestyle of using your power for good. Go out and value someone today. Your life matters, and you can make the world a better place. One word, one choice, one action of validation at a time.